Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Raas All-Stars 13 Raas Reboot Weekend. My name is Man, and I'm one of the Raas All-Stars 13 directors, along with Bansri Mehta and Shivani Patel. We're very excited to spend one last day with you, and so it's been a while since we've all been together, and I know we've missed those late-night practices, working on props all night before comp, dancing on stage with our teams, but I think most of all, we've just missed seeing each other and hanging out with each other. We hope that throughout the rest of the day, you can meet people, make new memories, and learn from our panelists about their different experiences. If you've been to any other sessions this weekend, we hope you found them both fun and informative, and we hope that today is no different. We would also like to take a moment to thank our board for putting in tremendous time and effort for bringing this event to all of you. So without further ado, let's kick off the last day of Raas Reboot.
Hey everyone, thank you so much for attending the Raas All-Stars 13 Raas Reboot Leadership session. Before we meet our panelists and dive into content, we will be dropping a form in the chat for you all to fill out if you haven't already earlier in the weekend. This form is just going to help us mark attendance throughout the weekend. We will also be dropping a Slido link in the chat for you all to send any questions you have anonymously at that time during the presentation. Time permitting, we will try to answer as many questions as we can before the end of the session. For this session and all others this weekend, we ask that you maintain proper session etiquette, which includes remaining muted until prompted by our panelists or board and being respectful in the Zoom chat. We would also love to see all your faces, so please turn on your cameras if you can. Now we're going to pass it over to our awesome panelists, Khushbu, Parth, Roshan, and Sid.
Hello, everyone. Thanks so much for joining. My name is Sid. I'm one of the panelists, and I will start this off. So kind of the way we wanted to do this was start with a small slide deck, just talking about our experiences. So we'll introduce ourselves a little bit more and tell you kind of our Raas experience, and then briefly touch on what we think leadership means and what the most important factors of that are. And then we have like our, I guess, pillars of leadership, which are the things that we really felt were the most important when leading a team, especially in the RAS circuit. And then we'll leave a lot of time at the end for questions from RAS, and then just an open forum from the audience where y'all can ask questions to us. I'll let Khushbu start.
Hey, hi guys, it's nice to see everyone. I'm Khushbu. I danced on Hoosier Raas, or I was part of Hoosier Raas for 4 years, and served on my last year as captain. And I graduated last spring, and I also served on hospitality during my sophomore year.
I'll go next. My name is Roshan. I was on RU Raga for 4 years, from 2016 to 2020. And then for my senior year, I was captain for that Wild West year with Sagar and Shruti. So yeah, I'll pass it on to Sid.
Hello again. I'm Sid. I was on Rec and Raas at Texas A&M from 2016 to 2020. I captained my last 2 years. And then most recently, I've stayed involved with Raas through DTX Dandia, first as logistics and now as a director.
Hey guys, sorry I got distracted by Roshan. Hey guys, my name's Parth Tandon. I'm from GW, and I was on GW Raas for 4 years, 2016 to 2020. And I was captain 2019 to 2020. And my sophomore year, I was judging chair for Raas Chaos. And currently, I graduated last year in May 2020, and I'm currently working in the Washington, D.C. area. So, yeah.
Cool. So the first thing we wanted to touch on is like, what does it mean to be a leader, and what should a leader do? And I think the first thing that came to all of our heads was a leader should inspire, especially in Raas, where there's so much creativity, passion, all these kind of buzzwords that you see on the board. It shouldn't just be about getting people to do a set of choreo or getting someone to hit this formation, right? Like, I think those are small goals that we do have, obviously, but in the grand scheme of things, whether you're a captain, whether you're a senior on the team, whether you're just a really, great gifted dancer that people look up to, right? You kind of have this inherent job as a leader to inspire the people around you to be better, right? I think that's something that we all felt was extremely important. So anytime you're going into a small task or doing something for the team, right, just keep in mind why you're doing that, and it is to inspire. And we feel that if you keep that in mind, everything else just kind of becomes a little bit easier. So our first like overall general piece of advice is just be mindful like what it means to be a leader in this setting, right? It is to inspire. I'll touch on the first pillar, which is leading by example. You can hit the next slide. So the first thing that we wanted to talk about is obviously leading by example. You should never really be asking your team to do something that you yourself wouldn't be comfortable doing, right? At the end of the day, we're Raas dancers. We're doing this because we're passionate, because we enjoy doing Raas. And so we never want to be in a situation as leaders where we are forcing or pushing our dancers or our teammates to be in a position where they're uncomfortable or don't have full faith in us. So the first kind of box we have on the left is creating a precedent of being the person to set the example, right? Inspire others to work just as hard as you do. I think time and time again, we've seen that if you put in the hard work and people see that, they're automatically more inclined to work just as hard because they see that it's working and they see that you do have this drive and you want this team to succeed. So definitely put the work in up front and your team will definitely respond positively. The second thing is be sure to goal set. This is something that I think we kind of do, kind of sort of, but we don't often do it really like tangibly. Show your team literally like what you are doing as a leader to improve. Again, that doesn't just mean captain. It can be a senior on the team, someone that has, you know, worked with Raas in the past, whatever it might be, right? The definition of a leader comes in many shapes and sizes. So show people like what it is that you're doing. I know one thing that's really common is like submitting videos. I know my team did that over breaks, right? But even other things, maybe you're following a certain, you know, diet plan if that's something you're into. Maybe you have like a workout regimen. Maybe you just listen to a mix every night before going to bed, right? Like show people how you're committed. And again, people will respond, right? Because they'll see, oh, this is working for you. I want to do the same thing, right? I want to be sure that because you're working hard, I'm also working hard. So our team moves forward together. And the last couple of things here is set small near-term goals. It's one thing to be ambitious and want to, you know, win RAS, and that's great too, right? Definitely have that ambition, but also be sure to set the small near-term goals so that you have those like small gratifying moments as you're progressing in the season. As a team, you don't want to just have one big goal and then be disheartened if you don't make it, right? It's not about just one goal, whether it's, you know, winning RAS or something else, but it's about the little things you learn along the way. So be sure to emphasize that as a leader that, hey, guess what we did this week, right? Or guess what we did yesterday. Those things matter too. And I think that really helps build team morale and culture. And kind of along those lines, envision what success looks like. Don't just have this lofty goal or don't just have these goals, but understand what it means to achieve that, right? What might that look like? I think that's something that can bring a team together and it helps bring that common focus together as well. And then lastly, and I think personally the most important, in my opinion, for this pillar is failing gracefully. It is okay to fail. I think that's the first thing you have to learn. And frankly, it's a hard lesson we all learn as leaders. Don't try to be perfect. Accept failures humbly. And if you do that, the team will respond empathetically. It's, you know, something that we've seen many times where people take a loss or, you know, a failing too hard. I know I was in that position one time. And it can be really frustrating, but at the same time, as a leader, people are looking up to you. So if something goes wrong, react objectively, understand why it happened, and just move forward. And then I think a really good quote that kind of encompasses leading by example is this one by Ralph Waldo Emerson, which is, our chief want is someone who will inspire us to be what we know we could be. Again, leadership is about being an inspirer, right? So do these things and your team will respond in a way that helps your team progress forward.
Thanks, Sid. So I'll talk about the second pillar, which is communication. And this is from personal experience. Like, communication has been the key for like the success of my time as captain. So it's something I really believe in. So I found this like little illustration for communication online, and essentially it's like essential communication skills for your career. But the important thing to note here is communication is a really important soft skill, and it transcends any college organization that you'll be part of. In fact, your communication skills are something you'll carry on even after college. In fact, among the top 10 skills, soft skills that people look for in a job place, like communication is number one. So all the skills that you're gaining right now as a leader or as a prospective leader, you will apply that to your life in the future, and it's definitely something helpful to know. So how do essential communication skills apply to your Ross experience, right? The first one is listening. I think a lot of us as captains or co-captains assume that a lot of it has to do with, hey, I'm the leader, so I'm going to talk at my team, or whatever comes in my brain is what we're going to go with. But a lot of times you don't listen, whether it's your teammates, whether it's your co-captain. That's a very important skill, is just to be able to realize that there are other people out there that have the level of expertise that you may not, and they may be better than at other things than you. So I think listening is a really important skill when it comes to just generally being a good leader. Another one is friendliness. And I think it happens quite often that when we're a captain, we try to take this role of like a harsh, like a dictator who like will get everybody straight and set everybody's ways. And if that is something that comes intrinsically to you, then good. And if that works for you, great. But if you are somebody, like I've seen it in the past, where like people that are really friendly and really outgoing have almost tried to tweak their personality because they think that it doesn't fit with the model of what a captain or a leader is supposed to be. It really comes off as unauthentic. So I would say, like, if you are somebody that's friendly and extroverted and is nice and kind, bring that personality onto your leadership roles, because the more authentic you make your leadership roles, the better you will come off as in that position. Another one is open-mindedness. I know I've struggled with this during my time as captain, but something to keep in mind, not everything is going to go according to plan. As Sid mentioned, you have to learn to fail gracefully. And part of that is just being open-minded and realizing that you may have like a plan in sight, but if that is not something that you're able to achieve, it's not the end all be all. And so really, like, when you're communicating with your teammates, when you're communicating with your captain, when you're communicating with your DJ, and they send you a mix, keep an open mind about it, because you never know what's going to come out of like a prospective opportunity. Another one is feedback. And I think this is probably, among all of these things, the most important one. So just as an example, every comp that our team would go to, we would have like at least a 30-minute feedback session the following practice, where we would just sit and talk about, okay, what went right, what went wrong, how did we feel, how was the comp experience, how are we interacting with each other, how was the performance, all of those things. We just have a 30-minute session where we just kind of open up, talk about it, like how we felt. And you, as a leader, you can get a lot of good content from those feedback sessions, because not only can you realize what you're doing wrong, but also what you're doing right and continue doing it. So I would highly recommend any kind of feedback sessions that you have with your team. Super helpful, super informative. And then confidence, and this ties back to what Sid was talking about, leading by example, right? Like, if you are somebody that portrays confidence, like, your team will follow that. Like, as a leader, you have a lot of impact on your team, and portraying confidence can be really infectious. There were times at comms where me and my co-captain did not know what we were doing. But if that was something that we let, slip by, and like, if we let that lack of confidence get to our team, it would have hurt us in a negative way. But, sometimes you just have to put on a brave face, be confident, and be sure that you're doing the right thing. And it's a very infectious personality that'll then catch on to the other team members as well. I feel like infectious is like a trigger word now, so I'm sorry I keep saying that, but you know what I'm talking about. And finally, we talk about nonverbal communication. This has everything to do with, when your dancers are in the practice room and they do a really good job at, like 16 beats or something, give them the validation, whether it's smiling, whether it's putting your thumbs up, whether it's like being really hopeful about what's going on, versus if they're not putting in the effort, show that communication, show the, the lack of like, oh, you guys can do better. Like all of that can be portrayed through nonverbal communication. And that's everything from like positive reinforcement to like how you conduct yourself when you're at a comp or at a practice or on stage, or when you're interacting with other teams. All of those are methods of non-verbally communicating with your other people, right? A third person who's looking up to you and is trying to learn from you. So body language and, like active listening, all of those are very important skills when it comes to like nonverbal communication or even verbal communication. But yeah, I think these are the 6 important things to keep in mind when you're like thinking about what communication looks like as a leader. And then if you click once, based on Sid's, if you just click next, based on Sid's quote, I was inspired to put a quote of my own. So this is James Humes, who's an author, who said, "The art of communication is the language of leadership," which is a super beautiful quote. And then an even more beautiful quote, if you click next again, is "Communication, the key is," by Yoda. So I think these are all just important things to keep in mind when you think about communication.
All right, so I'm going to tell you guys about the third pillar, which is integrity. And honestly, like my co-captains were some of the most inspiring people to me. And the number of times I heard my co-captain saying, "Remember where you come from," like honestly, just always sticks in my head at this point. The integrity piece of it means you guys have all been chosen as leaders because you've already been recognized as your team, by your team. You already have confidence or some extent of confidence in yourself that you'll be able to fulfill the role as a leader in a somewhat adequate way. One thing that tends to slip our mind more than anything is that at the end of the day, we're all human beings and we're all part of this collective that shapes a lot more than just your team. And like, this is a very PowerPointy little illustration here that if you consider that one white dot being you, amongst that, you've got your team, you've got past years that are bringing down their legacy to you, or if you're a new team, you've got members who have been putting in their passion and soul into trying to begin your team. And then you are setting the base for future years. Not only that, but you're representing your university and you're representing Raas and the general dance community, let alone any other communities that you as an individual or people in your team or your team as a whole are part of. So remembering that and really drilling down, really remembering every day, consciously making an effort to understand what integrity means to you as a team is really, really key. A lot of that translates in your behavior, obviously, as a captain, and how your team behaves when you're interacting with other teams, when you're interacting with the university, when you're interacting amongst yourselves. And again, I don't think that this is necessarily something that you guys know or like, oh, we don't want to have integrity. That's not what you guys are thinking. I know that, but it's one thing that you have to very consciously put an effort into instilling into your team, because at the end of the day, all of us are all 1 year at least out of dancing. And that is one thing that sticks with us throughout our life. That's the thing that you remember is how your team has become like a family and a part of this entire community. And you want to leave with those memories. So I'm just going to leave it at that and give it to Roshan.
Yep, so the next pillar that we decided upon was individuality. So many times when I've gone to mixers, I've met captains, met leaders, and when they're talking, we're chill. But then when they go back to the team, they completely change. They put on a mask, they might be very angry, or they might be yelling a lot, screaming a lot. So I'm just like, why are you guys so different when you guys are, just normally talking compared to when you're leading your team? This is something that Bart touched upon as well. So there's kind of two parts to why individuality is important. First is creativity, right? We see this a lot with just choreo and execution, but it's also how you carry yourself, how you lead yourself. I'll speak through examples. Like back then, an old Raga, like the captains were kind of like tough as nails, right? If you messed up, you knew you messed up, and then they tell you, and then they be pretty tough. And so when it comes to like approachability, it became tougher for some of the newbies. But then the captains changed, it became more friendly, and it was easier to communicate with them. So just the creativity, not only just obviously choreo and execution, but also your leadership style. You're gonna try different things. And that will change every year. I feel like when a team comes, when there's a new set of leaders, the team functions differently, and that's just where the creativity lies behind. And next, I think most importantly, is building trust. Another example, at Chaos, the morning prop practice where you have to wake up at like 6 a.m. We needed sandbags, and we need to pick it up from Home Depot. All the guys, they put their alarms on for 5 a.m. We all slept through them. And then at 5:30, someone knocked on our door, and I was the closest one to the door, but I was just like, screw it, I'm just gonna go back to sleep. And then after that, 10 minutes later, there was another knock. So I was like, oh, fine, I'll open it. So I opened it, and it was our props chair. And she was like, don't we have to go get sandbags? And I'm like, yes, we do. We do have to get sandbags. So, that's it. That's where that culture and that build of passion and trust comes in. When you're a leader and you are showing two things, being genuine and being transparent, people will trust you as time goes on. Being genuine, that's one thing that was touched on by Parth again, like being yourself, not putting on a mask when you go into practice and then yelling, being not yourself, going in, that's hiring too. Imagine coming back from practice every single night after being some other completely different person. I know there was this one practice where I was, there's one practice before Chaos where I decided to just be tough. And then at the end of the practice, Shruti came up to me, she's like, you're kind of being scary. And I'm like, shit, if I'm scaring Shruti, who is like the toughest one out there, there's a problem. So, and then I came back home, I was so tired, I was like, I'm never doing this again. So just being genuine, being true to who you are, that's it will help in the long run. It'll help build trust too. Next is being transparent, owning up to what shortcomings you have or what you don't know. That'll help a lot in the long run. I know there's a few things that I knew that I could depend on, like Sagar, for instance. I knew he had all the knowledge when it came to props, and Shruti was someone who knew musicality so well. So when it came to making decisions on those ends, I knew that those were the people I would trust at the end of the day. And next is this acknowledgement. The team's chatting in the chat. So, but acknowledgement, just knowing if someone does something for you, acknowledge it. Treat them how you treat yourself if you did something great, right? So yeah, those are sort of the three things that help you build trust, and individuality, just showing who you are, that will take you for a long time of building that trust. So what are the actionable items? What can you do? So first is knowing yourself and knowing your team. If you know that your personality is not being tough as nails, then don't do it. I know I'm not tough as nails. My personality is in senior years, I guess, making poop jokes all the time. So I made poop jokes all the time, and my co-captains did too. We just built each other up on shitty jokes. Yeah, shitty jokes. But yeah, that's what we did. And I know our team reflected on the same way. They liked fooling around. They loved that work hard, play hard culture. So that's what we did. Next, and this is the biggest thing I think, for all the captains that are in the chat, or all the people that want to become captains in the CAT, don't compare yourself to others. When you compare yourself to others, you'll be looking at how much lesser you often are than the other person. Rather, just take inspiration. And we know how comparing goes, right? Like, I don't know, like Amrita auntie, her son's going to Harvard University while you're going to university that has buses drive into student centers. That's a true story, by the way. No one got injured, so I can make a joke out of that. But we've learned, like, comparing ourselves. We've been in that situation before, so don't compare yourself to others. This will happen often in the beginning of the season. I know a lot of teams have taken like 1 year hiatus. So a lot of alumni, they might not know who's on the team right now. They might not know what your team is capable of. So they might be like, who's on your team? And you'd be like, well, I'm standing right here. My co-captains are standing right there. We're about to have a killer season. And so that's going to come with doubt. When you start comparing yourself to others, that's the result of having doubt. Just be confident who your team is, what they're going to do. And you'll hear a lot in the beginning of the season. Like you'll hear like, oh, this so-and-so team already has their mix and choreo and their entire set done, and then you're going to be like, oh, well, I still have to work on the first song. And so, that's that, you don't have to measure up to other teams. Take inspiration. You will, many times when you even like choreo, you watch other teams, and just turn off the laptop and just do you. And last, everything starts with that top layer. It starts with your co-captains, how you relate to them. So I could say for myself, at least my co-captains are my best friends, and we started that really, really early. That started with our love for, again, things such as like poop jokes, our love for drinking. We related to each other really, really well. And for a matter of fact, we didn't talk that much 2 years prior to becoming captains. But then once we did become captains, that's what we wanted to do. We wanted to have a strong relationship with each other. And then when the team saw that, that was just that pillar, just that inspiration, I guess. If the co-captains are very, very close, I'll cry too. If the co-captains are very close, they have something going. And so, everything starts with your co-captains. That's where the 2 or 3 of you, 4 of you, how many co-captains you are, you guys are identifying your personality, that, and everybody else will feed off of that. If you have a winning personality, your entire team will feed off of that. If you and that's where it starts. So, and I included that last quote just for some reference. But so that's our last pillar. And we do have, I don't know if there's questions, if the board wants to go through that or not.
Give me 1 second. The internet's slow. Something's up.
We can also like take questions from the audience, and then if there aren't any, then we can switch back to the prepared questions. Like either way works.
Yeah. Here, oh yeah, we'll give everyone a few seconds if they have any questions. All right. So this is just a question that we kind of have. What was your team like when you took on the captain role? So for example, was it a new team or was it a team that was well established already? And how did you guys like take that on? Whether like, was there did you guys feel like a lot of pressure, whether it was a new team or whether it was like to keep up that team name?
Yeah, okay, fine, I'll start. So Hoosier Ross has been on the circuit for quite a while. It's been on the circuit for quite a while, but the culture changed a lot in my time. My first year, I think we had been on the circuit, like we entered in 2009 or something like that. But my first year was definitely a team that didn't, the priority was much more to experience the Raas circuit than it was to win in the Raas circuit, which is completely fine until that starts taking away from your reputation. So that's how our team was. And I started off with some incredible captains who helped start building up that reputation. By my so we had like a dry spell for a while. My junior year, the team won its first trophy in like 9 years or something like that. And it's just kind of been building up from there, but we kind of like started from the bottom. Now we're here. So that's where we're at.
Yep, I can go next. So for us, like for GW Ross, it's been an interesting journey because we're a very old team. And with that comes a lot of like traditions where we've done things a certain way, albeit sometimes inefficiently. For instance, like we're obviously like an exhibition at Ross Chaos, but up until my junior year, we would not decide a theme until after Chaos. So imagine creating a 4-minute set, dancing to it, and then trying to squeeze a theme into a already created set, right? Like it doesn't work as well. So around my junior year and then my senior year, you know, we started kind of deciding, hey, we're going to decide the theme very early in the year. And I think that's what most people do. But that was a big change that we brought about, which like for some reason we never did in the previous year. So a lot of our team's history has been a lot of trial and error and like realizing that we're doing things a certain way and then improving on them over time. And, you know, GW Raas is one of those teams where we make it to nationals maybe once every 3 or 4 years, you know, and where it's funny because we actually have the highest number of second places in the entire like circuit. So it's always like, oh, we're good, but never the best. And that's like something that we've really struggled with as like, oh, this is who we are, but really tried to break out of that mold and say, you know, we have to kind of get rid of that mentality and like think about ourselves in a better light. So that's been our struggle. It's like we're an old team, but we have also old ways of doing things. And as time has progressed, it's a struggle of like realizing, okay, this is inefficient, this is efficient, and then kind of picking and choosing what we want to carry on and work from there.
Yeah, I could piggyback off of part two because Raga is a really old team, and we stuck to traditions over the years, and we stuck to a very the same reputation throughout the years as well. I think this year we wanted to break a lot of the traditions, and we knew it coming in too, because a lot of the leaders we've had in the past couple of years, they're all from sort of the same origin. They had I think it was a campfire year where we've had, you know, those choreographers since then, and this was the first year where, you know, it was completely fresh new faces, and so we felt comfortable with breaking, you know, some of those traditions and instilling new ones that we thought. And I believe this year could be another year as well, where, you know, there'll be people and there'll be captains and leaders who will be breaking tradition of their own team. And that's great because it'll help with the innovation. It will change choreo, it'll change formations, it will change the way teams are run. And that's not a bad thing. I think that's a great thing, and especially with the 1 year hiatus. And I think a lot of teams are taking on more newbies as well. There'll be freshman faces. I think that'll just be overall better for the circuit.
Yeah, I can wrap up this question. I think Reckon was also a relatively old team, albeit not I don't think it was a super well-known team, just because I think, like Kushu said with Hoosier, it was more of like a less experienced circuit, right? As opposed to let's try to make a mark or a dent in the circuit. And so I think we've been around since 2009, and I think we placed maybe once or twice, like back in the day, like 2012 or 2014. But I think the way, like, I would say the way we approached our team, especially my junior and senior year, was like, let's treat it like a new team, right? Like it is a new set of people. We had a lot of people graduate. So 2019 was kind of a really kind of new start in a sense. So I think Parth put it really well, was like, we had a lot of old ways of doing things. And that was fine, right? They worked, but the question we kept asking ourselves was, how can we do this better, right? How can we automate this? How can we make it easier for our dancers? And I think as we kept asking ourselves those questions, we continued to find answers slowly but surely, right? And I think that had a really big impact, especially last year when we finally were able to break through, because all those things kind of came together. We had a better understanding of, okay, what does it take to succeed in this area or in this aspect? And then how do we do that to the best of our ability without losing our like individuality, as Roshan put really well. So I think we treated it like as if it was a new team, as if like we're walking into the circuit for the first time, as if no one knew who we were, right? And in a way, I think that helped us a lot, because we didn't hold ourselves back by, oh, this is how it's been done, therefore that's how it will be done, right? It was more of, this is what we're trying to do, what's the best way to do it? And I think once you reorient your mindset that way, a lot of really cool things can happen.
So how do you guys motivate people to put in the work, but also make it fun at the same time?
I think Roshan mentioned this in his leadership pillar, but you know, it's something as simple as making jokes like during practice, being like that goofy personality that you are, if you are that person, like bringing that onto the role is super helpful in kind of maintaining a fun and like dance, practice, or even when you're at a comp, like really encouraging people to have fun during mixer, go mingle with people, go dance. If they don't want to, then go eat food. Anything that like they want to do, really like give them that level of freedom, but also make them realize like at the end of the day, like we are not for the most part, we're not professional dancers. Actually, we're not professional dancers. Let's be honest. We do this for fun. This is a student org at the end of the day. And we are here because in some form of way, we love to dance. And so constantly like reminding them, like, what is the point of all of this? Why do you spend so many hours practicing? It's because it's fun. It's a student org. And that's what it should be. So really like nailing that point home really helps reemphasize, okay, like the whole point of this is to have fun. And it's kind of hard when people are constantly telling you that that's the point. I think another thing that I'll quickly mention that ties to that is often people in your practice will come with, a lot of, it's a tough day at school, classes weren't so good, personal issues in life. Like a lot of that can easily be brought into practice time, and it can have a very negative effect on that individual, but also on the rest of the team. And something to emphasize as a leader is, hey, we're always here to talk to you. Whatever you're going through, like come talk to us. But as much as it is in your capacity, try to make Raas a safe space for yourself. Try to make this almost a escape from everything else at school, and try to, leave all your troubles at the door. When you come in, you practice, you smile, you dance. And then once you're out, make sure to communicate with your captains and let them know what's going on with you. Because as long as you're treating Raas like an escape from like all the troubles in life, it'll never become a trouble. So keeping that in mind is super important.
If I can add to that, I don't know if you guys have experienced this in your guys's practices, but the least fun practices are the ones that are disorganized and where you're just kind of like, everyone's like, what's going on? Why are we doing this? Like that kind of thing. If you can come in, if you know what your goal is for that day, what you want to complete, and like hit that in somewhat of a disciplined manner, then it leaves the space for you to also have fun during that practice, which seems almost counterintuitive because it's like discipline versus fun. Like, how does that align? But it does. The other thing I want to mention, which is one of the questions on Slido and is very important for everyone to keep in mind. One of the questions is, did you ever feel overwhelmed as a captain, and how did you handle that? That is something that most people coming into the captaincy underestimate, how you need to take care of yourself. And as soon as you can see, for me, it was like, oh, I saw Raas as my meditation. I'm like a meditation geek. So like, I loved coming in and just like focusing in. And because we as captains were able to bring in this like calmness, or well, it might not be calmness, but the sense of like, we're taking care of ourselves, then we could translate that over to the team, which then the team picks up on as having fun, that kind of thing. The other thing is really understanding your team. As Roshan mentioned, the individuality, understanding that fun for one team is different for fun for another, and fun for one person is different from fun for another. And so certain captains are going to relate to certain people differently, and just like playing off of that and understanding your teammates really feeds into that.
So one of the other questions is, how do you guys recruit new people, especially guys, and encourage them to practice outside of the scheduled practices that you guys have?
Put your guys on the front stage. Like, but guys have to be at all of the recruiting stuff. It's so important.
What was the first part of the question? It cut out a little for me.
Oh, I'm sorry. So like, how do you recruit new people, especially guys? And then the second part is like, how do you encourage them to practice outside your like scheduled practices?
I can touch on the second piece a little bit. I think kind of going back to the pillar of leading by example, it's so hard to like get someone to practice outside if like your leaders are not doing it. So definitely like I'll bring back and harp on the lead by example. Like I can give a personal story. Like some people know like I actually like shattered my left arm like during audition videos. And so a lot of like for me a lot of it was like, okay, as a captain, like how do you choreo with when you're missing like a whole arm, right? Like you kind of can't, right? So the best thing for me to do was, okay, keep showing up to practice. We would do like 6 minutes or like 7 minutes where you just did footwork as like a warm up to different mixes. So I had my feet, so I did the footwork, right? So like no matter what's going on, like do your best to like show the team, hey, I care, and like despite everything else going on, like there is a way and a will, so like it can happen. I think that's like the best thing I could say. It's just like do it as a leader, and I think your team will follow suit. Just show the importance and constantly emphasize that.
Yeah, so I think, you know, most people when they're starting out, there's just that drive of, you know, you want to get these moves right, you want to get this choreo right. So outside of practice, you'll be practicing in your dorm room, and to encourage that environment is just, you know, putting your newbies on the spot basically. And many times in our practice after we did it all out, our newbies did it all out after that, and we'd all be cheering and we'd all be yelling and we'd be encouraging them. So, you know, that's one of the things, you know, just putting them in that environment so that, you know, they're seen as well. But also I think the flip side to this, and I think Krish also spoke about this in the last question, was also giving that, you know, outside of practice, you know, you guys could like or people could like listen to music and listen to the mix over and over so that they get which beat to hit choreo, but also, you know, taking that break as well. I feel like practice is for practice. Outside of practice, you know, have a clear cut break so that you don't burn yourself out over time. I think some of the best ways where you can stay connected, you know, kind of, you know, practice in the back of your head, but also, you know, take a break is, you know, just meeting up with your team. I think some of the best times where we created choreo was outside of practice. It was like at a birthday party, or it was at, you know, after coming back from party, we just like come up with some crazy ideas. So we're improving our set, but also not, you know, debilitating ourselves physically by dancing like 24/7. So yeah.
Yeah, so for us, the recruitment aspect is always difficult because at GW, there's not a lot of people interested in dancing, but there's like 4 Desi dance student orgs. So that really like narrows the pool down for each person, right? So just to give you an example, when I was captain, we had 6 people try out the entire time. And guess how many made it? 6. Everybody that tried out made the team. They ended up doing really well. But it was a combination of, hey, they were dedicated, but also, hey, we were desperate. So that's dedication and desperation is probably the perfect combination of recruitment that you'll find. I'm going to give you some very borderline creepy tactics to try to find people when you're recruiting. And everybody here who's been a captain or been a leader is lying if they think they haven't done that. But what we used to do is we used to go to like the incoming classes Facebook page, and I would literally search Patel, Shah, Mehta, Edison, New Jersey, Piscataway, New Jersey, East Brunswick, South Brunswick, everything. There is a correlation of people that actually want to do these dances, and usually it's people from New Jersey / good Jews that know what this is about. And the best way to start off is look at how many of people that you think will make the team are actually gonna, you know, come to GW, go to like other student orgs that have like the same affinity, go to their events and table there. You know, if like the Indian Students Association is having like a freshman dinner, for instance, ask them if you can table there, or ask them if you can give a quick pitch at the beginning, and then like try to align your events with their events. Like I know for us, like we try to collaborate with GW Bhangra, which is the Bhangra team at GW. We try to collaborate our teaching sessions so that they don't overlap, so that if somebody's interested in both, they could join both and they don't have to pick sides, you know? And at the end of the day, to be honest, like I think with recruitment, it's tough because you don't want to push it, because Raas is a big commitment. And if they're not committed even to go into teaching sessions, it's very difficult to get them to commit to, 10, 12-hour practices a week. So really try to hone in on, is this person really committed? And, try to get that out of them. But yeah, I think looking people up, like looking at the other student orgs that like what kinds of people are coming to those events, those are great tactics for like trying to find people.
This is kind of like a scenario question. So say you're like a new captain and you're not getting the support of your co-captains or your board. What do you do in a situation like that?
Just be direct. I'll keep it short. Just speak it out. I think the more you hold it inside of you, the more it'll kind of eat you up, and the less efficient things will get. So honestly, just when it comes to being direct, just say it, and yeah, I'll just keep my answer short for that.
Yeah, I'll just echo that. Like, communicate. You have to communicate and be willing to do that. Part did a great job of like elaborating on that, but it goes between leaders too, right? Not just leader to team and vice versa. So communicate and be willing to take on some more work for the benefit of the team. I think that's like the best thing you can do in that situation.
I would say also don't doubt the commitment from the newbies that are going to come in. You'd be surprised what new people and returners have to offer to the team.
Yeah, one way to kind of try to integrate everybody, like what Khushbu said, is there were times, and when you're a leader or when you're choreoing or something, there'll be times where you'll just be scatterbrained and not know what to do. Sometimes we just used to take 5 minutes of practice time and say, hey, we need 8 beats for this little segment. This is the choreo before, this is the choreo after. Go ham. And we would just take 5 minutes. It's kind of almost a break. It's a fun time because they're all working with each other. And we would just take 5 minutes for everybody to try to come up with choreo. And you really start to see some like people's creativity, because it's like, when I was a freshman, I got to contribute to the set, right? To some choreo. And like, for like having the captains say, okay, we're going to do this, having like, as a freshman who doesn't really understand Raas, but having something that you choreoed in the set makes you feel so much more invested in it. And I think in the back of their minds, like it makes them want to work harder. So try as much as possible to get everybody to feel like they're part of the set, whether it's a non-dancer, even like e-board members, as much as you can get them to be integrated into the set, like it'll benefit you, because that's how much dedication everyone will put into it.
You guys kind of touched on this, but what advice would you give smaller teams in terms of member retention, creating new choreo, and kind of just being able to compete with larger teams?
I'm going to say understand what your personal goals are, and understanding again that the individuality part of it and the legacy, I don't know how satisfying of an answer this is, but really understanding that whatever you do this year is going to contribute a lot to what happens in the future was something that drove me a lot. Understanding that my team was not necessarily going to compete at the level as some others, but we were fulfilling our own goals. And that meant that if we were happy when we left the year, which I feel very blessed to be able to say that our team really advanced last year, I know that this coming year, I have a lot of faith that they're going to do well. And that's my achievement as well as a captain. So just keeping that in mind is huge.
Yeah, I would say if you, for the small team, big team argument, like I would say play to your strengths is really important. Like if you're a team that has dancers that aren't as talented as some of the bigger teams, but you have dancers that are way more, artistically inclined, or way more like good at, if they're better at acting, or if they're better at, some sort of thing, play to those strengths, try to bring that into your set rather than trying to do choreo that you think like a big team will do, like I think that was a very important lesson for like my team, my senior year. It was like, we realized that like, we can never, include 16 micro beats in one beat and try to choreo like that. That's not our strength. That's not who we are. And so really assessing what's the ability of our dancers, what's the ability of the set, and try to create a set around the dancers and not vice versa. I think is really helpful, like for you, like, and if things like team dynamic, right? How friendly your team is, how much fun they're having on stage, all of those things. If that's something that that's your strength, play to that, because trust me, it goes a long way. So yeah, really, like, I get that you're trying to compete with other teams or match up to their level, but you have to do it your own way.
Yeah, I know beginning of when Sagar Shruti and I started coordinating and started creating formations, we look at so many videos of other teams and we'd be like, wow, we gotta have that, we gotta have that. Like, why don't we have this? Like, why, you know, what's missing from what we have compared to what all these beautiful videos of beautiful performances, and that would, you know, scare us, that would make us nervous, and so with that, just, you know, close the laptop, don't look at other teams, try to be different. If you have experience, or if you love fusion dances, if you love Bhangra, anything, you know, bring in inspiration from not just other teams, but other things that you like as well. So yeah, don't be afraid to be different, and actually just play to that. And maybe that might be your stamp when you're competing. People will remember you for that, rather than, you know, trying to measure up to other teams. And then the second is that, you know, when you're also looking at other teams, I don't, in like, before the show got started, before the show got started, I look around, other teams would be doing their chants and they'd be meeting other people. And then I look to my right, and then our team will be sleeping in the stands. So I'm like, oh, are we doing something wrong? Am I missing something? Should we be doing something? And then I obviously fell asleep too. But and then before, you know, we got into dance, that's when we got hyped. That's where we started jumping around, started yelling and everything like that. And so, you know, don't become nervous. Like I said before, don't compare yourself to other teams or what anybody else is doing, because that would just, again, it will make you feel lesser than you actually are.
I'll just add something real quick. Yeah, like +1 to everything they said. Like, don't try to be like another team, because you're not that team. You're your team, right? I think Roshan touched on individuality a lot, and I think that's like the perfect kind of piece to talk on for this question. I will say, like do your research. Like, you want to know what is out there in the circuit, but then like have the right balance. Like, yeah, close the laptop, put it away, and then say, okay, like, what can we do? For my team, it was like, you know, we loved fast choreo. I don't know what it was, but we just enjoyed it, right? So our first song was really fast, and that like was something people kind of remembered for whatever reason. So like that was like kind of us playing to our strengths, or like playing to what we like to do. And I think if your team enjoys what they're doing, and this is like tried and true, right? Like, if you enjoy it, it shows on stage, right? And the judges can tell. And I think by virtue, you'll feel like you have more success because you are enjoying it, right? As opposed to doing something that is a mold that you're fitting into. On the flip side, like, coming up with your own like identity, especially for a new team, will not, right? I always say, like, for Reckon, like, it took like, I think it was like 2 or 3 years in the making, frankly, for us to like have a really true, like, who is Reckon Raas, like, what is their identity? And that's okay, right? Like, we like asked ourselves, like, what can be our signature step? What is something we love to do, right? Like, what is something that only we can, like, for lack of a better word, like, only we could do, or something that when someone says, oh, remember that, people think, oh, it was like Reckon and not any other team. And we try to like make that like a stamp that we have, that like, okay, now like when someone thinks of this element, hopefully they're thinking about it. So again, +1 to everything they said, like, try to do something that you're great at and focus on that, but don't expect it to happen overnight. These things take time, and definitely put in the work, and I think you'll see results, whether it's a month, a year, or multiple years. Hopefully that would be your legacy.
Yeah. Another thing I wanted to add to this, because I think this is like applicable to all teams, not just small teams, but something that's really important is like build traditions that your team has, whether it's like a holistic team experience or if it's individual small little things you do. Something I realize is that walk from when you're in the audience to when you're backstage and then when you're on stage is so undervalued, because your dancers are so nervous in those like 20, 25 minutes where like, it's like, hey, you guys are backstage and then you're going on stage. Like, I don't know, I'm getting nervous just thinking about it right now, because you're always like, your heart's always pounding and all that. So the question is, how can you make that a little bit less nerve-wracking, right? And a good way to do that is induce traditions, whether it's doing a team huddle, whether that's praying for like a minute or so. I know our team has a tradition where if you guys are Gujarati, like, you know, there's the 3 dots that you put behind your ear for good luck. So the oldest female member of the team for that year goes around putting like 3 dots on everybody's ear, and like we'll say something nice, or, you know, like you're going to do great or something like that. And that's something that really eases us. Another one we have is this is just for seniors, but for the graduating seniors at our first comp of the season, we, the seniors prepare a roast for the rest of the team. So right when we're like in like before side stage, we just huddle up and they just roast the shit out of the entire team. It started as like a poem and it was cute, but as the team got more ratchet, we started roasting each other. But the little things like that, right? Take your mind off of the nerves of the performance and focus on what's important, and that's like your team, your traditions. And I think just really, as this is going to sound, I think you guys call it chuggy, but doing all these cute things, it's really important in setting the tone of like, okay, this is who we are as a team and we're here for each other. And it makes a big difference on stage, like really, really calms your nerves.
So what method did you find was best in terms of teaching people who have never done Ross before or even danced?
Be patient, please be patient. They're there because they're interested in doing what it is that you have to show them. So like always keep that in the back of your mind, that, you know, you are trying to teach them something that they're passionate about. That's actually a really important thing just in general. I think one thing that we did was like, or I tried to do, is understand like put yourself in their shoes and be like, okay, if I was in this position, like, why do I feel like I'm messing up, right? Try to understand from their perspective. You're the one that maybe has made the choreo or understands the choreo really well. Just throw that out the window for a moment and be present with that dancer and say, okay, like, where exactly are you messing up and what are you thinking? And I think as you start to have that conversation, I've noticed like the choreo lightens up a lot, right? You want them to hear the beat the way you heard it, and that's not always intuitive. I mean, by no means is it always intuitive, right? So really break it down, be patient, and try to understand to the best of your ability, where are they coming from and what are they thinking? And I think when you try to untangle the knot that way, it's a lot easier than just like repeatedly saying, this is how you do it, this is how you do it, and do it again. It's not always the most constructive, conducive for learning. And I think once, especially when like someone has made like a song's worth of choreo, like there are trends and patterns in like how they hear the music. When you try to teach the choreo that way, where you're understanding where they're coming from and then like removing the confusion, bringing in like your intuition of the music, that naturally lends itself to the future choreo, because now they're starting to hear the music that way too, hopefully.
Yeah, so I got like 2 more things. We often early on we pair each other up specifically. So when I started, I had like a level. I kind of looked at it levels, like first getting the choreo, then the cleanliness and the flexing, then the head and the facials and all that stuff. So that's that. So when I started with choreo, I looked to my captain, and then when I looked at flexing, I looked at someone named Danae. You know, that pairing each other off just by like looking at how someone's dancing and then getting critiques from them. That's, I think that's huge, and so that helps a lot as well. And I completely forgot my first point, but yeah, I'll think about it. I'll rethink it. Yeah.
So for us, we started doing this, I think a year, like my senior year, but we do this thing for the first 3 practices when we start early in the year. We call it Ross Boot Camp, where literally we will book 2 to 3 rooms, and we'll have like 1 or 2 leaders assigned to each thing. So one room will be footing, just footing. Another room will be like dandiya spinning. Another room will be like facials. So just like practicing facials, head nods, doing like focusing on one part of the dance for like 20-25 minutes, and then rotating, and we'll do them in small groups just so it's a little bit more personable. And the boot camp really worked well, because for people that and then we have another one for like windmill, because that's our signature move, and it's like we want them to get it right. So it's like, think of like 3 or 4 things that you want them to really focus on or start getting early, and maybe create like a 20-minute session around each one and say, okay, we're just going to do 1, 2, 3 for the next 10 minutes. and then you rotate on, and then they move on to facials or head nods or something like that. So that's something we found really helpful. At first we were like, why would we waste 3 practices doing this when we can just start teaching them choreo? But it really helped in terms of like solidifying the foundation. And then once we started teaching choreo on day 4, they started remembering, oh, like we learned about, doing head nods in the boot camp. So then we saw like a much higher likelihood of them doing head nods without us having to emphasize it. So the boot camp really worked well for us.
I'll give like kind of 3 strategies. So our team had a lot of newbies my senior year. So pairing off wasn't always like, ideally we would have like a newbie and maybe a couple of, a returner and then maybe a couple of newbies and like kind of pair off that way. But we had like a lot of newbies, 5 returners. So we basically made 5 families that we used that these families would kind of like coordinate amongst themselves to practice amongst themselves. When we started off, we would start off with like group learning how to double touch or whatever the case was. Then we would break off into families, and then the families kind of stayed, but like we would kind of change up the groups as we understood where people's skills were and who needed to work on what. The other thing is even like switching the returners amongst the groups, because even like I did things a little bit differently than some of my co-captains and stuff. So each of us kind of picked up on things a little differently. So the small groups were really helpful. Second thing, diagonals or like rows. So if you want to try to get everyone's arms kind of in the same angle, and not even doing any legs, just doing arms in a row, you have the mirror in front of you and they can see exactly what's going on in front of them. So then like the person in the front would even call out to the back saying, okay, I can see your arm, I can see whatever. That helps with arm stuff. The last thing, which kind of just like, my team just kind of did this and it makes me cry a little bit because they're just so amazing, was our team would just kind of like, without us knowing, they would just kind of pair off and like do their own thing on a Friday and just like have fun with it. They would be laughing, whatever, make lunch out of it and stuff like that. So facilitating that as well. You as a captain, or even as the leaders in general, don't have to be the ones who are consistently drilling everything, even if it's 2 newbies who are working together about like, obviously you want to kind of have some kind of, okay, you're not practicing that right. So you don't want to drill in that like specific way of doing that footstep or the step, because that's not right. But beyond that, like having newbies and having returners or just individuals in the team being able to coordinate amongst each other and have that one-on-one is really helpful. Understanding, again, the individuality is like super key in this, because everyone has their own things that they're working on.
Yeah. One final thing I'll add is that's really important, especially when someone has no idea what Raas is. Make them fall in love with Raas, right? And the easiest way to do that is watch a lot of YouTube videos as a team. So sometimes like what we would do, especially early on, like after practice, we would just like during a break, we would all sit down, put up like a projector or a laptop, whatever you have, and just watch a set. And I remember when I was a freshman, it was literally my first week, and our captain showed us like Raga baseball year and then like DSD pirate year. And that is when I knew I was like, holy, like crap, I'm part of something way bigger. Making them watch as many Raas performances that you consider, these are some of the best. Start them off like that. And then while they're watching the performances, point things out that you like and say, look how well they hit this formation. Look at how high their kicks go. Look at how good their head nods are. Pointing things out that you want them to learn while they're watching the performances has been super helpful, especially when it's like they have no idea what the dance is. The only way to do it is to throw them in the deep end and make them watch as many dances as possible. And eventually, like if they're somebody like me, they're going to start watching it on their own time. But you have to start that, and you have to kind of push them in that direction first.
And our final question for the session is, how do you help bridge the gap between older and newer members and reinstate the team culture?
I can go first. So that's something we've struggled with, and I'm sure everybody has problems with, is like there have been issues with, like in the past with like, power dynamics, and it's like very dumb things like, oh, we're seniors, so we get the beds at the hotels, and you're a freshman, so you sleep on the floor. Random things like these have somehow seeped their way in and were tagged as tradition. I think as a leader, your first thing to do is to call that out and to make sure that never happens. And more importantly, people know that that's not the norm. Like, that's not something you endorse. That's not something that you want to actively be part of your team culture, is some sort of weird power dynamic where older kids all of a sudden have more power than the younger ones. A good way to do that is to get the freshmen started really early with the non-dancing part of the set. And if you were a former captain, or if you're a captain or will be a captain, you know or will know that there's so much more that goes into a Ross captaincy than just creating a dance. And get them involved in those things. So for instance, like, we used to have prop making sessions where we would literally like make our dandia, or we would like make our backdrop and stuff. And we would get the freshmen involved too. Like, in fact, if you guys know the Stone Age set, the bone dandia that we had was actually a freshman's idea, to like use the ping pong balls, and we had ping pong balls in the ends, and then we used athletic tape to wrap those around, and then white tape around it. And that was all that freshman's idea, and none of us were creative enough to do that. But get those young people involved early on, and like make them do the non-dancing parts of the set as well, because like I said earlier, it'll get them more invested in the set. But also it really bridges the gap of like, the biggest thing with power dynamics is like lack of information and lack of experience. And lack of experience is just, it'll take them time to get a certain number of years in the circuit. But if you can bridge the gap between lack of knowledge between your seniors and your freshmen, it'll really decrease that weird power dynamic that exists. So really get them up to speed with the logistical side of things, and that really makes them more responsible and kind of bridges that gap of like team dynamic.
Yeah, I'll quickly add on that. I think culture was a huge thing for us as a team. I think that's something we were also just like struggling with, at least the first years I was on the team. You have to make a really conscious effort to like change that. It doesn't just happen because now you're like in a position of leadership. It is something you have to like go after actively and show the team that you are trying to change it. I love Part's comment on like information. Don't hold back on information. There's like almost never a good reason to, frankly. Our team was really good about organization. We had everything in like a team drive, whether it was finances, choreo videos, you name it, it was there, right? We also had like our formations on the Google Drive, so like people could literally review it before coming to practice. I think all of these things contribute to the team taking ownership, and not just, okay, the leaders or the captains do it and then we just absorb it, consume it, right? It's you as a dancer also have a responsibility and ownership of being on this team. And I think if you're able to shift the paradigm that way, then the entire team comes together and says, okay, like the culture is of, we are all expected to be on the same footing, not just captains do this work or props chairs do this work and then we follow suit. We would do things like prop rotations. Like everyone was responsible for knowing how to build and break down every single prop, regardless of if you're on props crew or a props chair. You had to know it if you're on the team, right? Because if something happens, we need you to be there for us, right? Just one of the many examples of like how we tried to make sure everyone was on the same page and everyone had ownership of being on this team, not just, absorbing the information and like being a dancer. I think that helped us a lot.
Yeah, and just reiterating Barth and Sid's point, just spreading out that responsibility. I know we were at prop setup at ECS, and there was a few fires that we had to burn out, like not burn out, but to like put out. And so I was working on the backdrop, and then there was something else that went wrong, and then some of the newbies came up to me and they were like, "Yo, that went wrong." I'm like, "Okay, just go handle it. Just go at it." And so after 30, 40 minutes, came back to it and they completely fixed it, and they made it even better than what I imagined it to be. So just even just giving out that shared responsibility, it goes a long way. I know Shruti, she also she adds a lot of the girl newbies in when they were pouring girl solo. And one of the newbies came out with one of the moves, and it became one of my favorite moves watching girls solo. So just including them in decisions, including them in responsibility, it goes a long way. And then the last thing I want to add is, after comps and after just outside of practice, is asking them a simple question like, "What do you guys think about our performance, just asking that question and hearing their input, it also goes a long way. It makes them feel heard, but also it could, differentiate how you choreo, how you lead as well. So.